Now I'll call this regular workshop meeting of the City Council to order. Council, you have before you a copy of the proposed agenda. I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda and also the minutes and consent items that are listed on that for the May 21st, 2019 regular workshop meeting, May 21st, 2019 regular meeting.
Move adoption.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. We have one non-consent item on the agenda for tonight. This is the proposed fiscal year 2019-2020 budget adoption.
Mayor, members of council, good evening. Over the last several months, we have met on a weekly basis to work through the various items relative to the budget. We've held a public hearing in November. We held a public hearing in May. At that time, we did receive one or two comments, and those were taken into consideration. But tonight before you is the potential adoption of your budget for FY20. As you'll recall, the fiscal year of the city is July 1 through June the 30th. The items for the overview, we are recommending, based upon the actions which you have taken, you are recommending that the property tax remain as it has been for the last several years. So therefore, there'll be no property tax increase. There is a recommendation for a 2.25% water and sewer rate increase relative to compensation, a 2.2% COLA increase. However, we want to discuss that just a moment to make sure we're all on the same page. As you'll recall, the police department, certain components of the police department has a step plan. That step plan is in the base budget. So the 2.2% does not affect people in the step plan unless those people in the police department step plan are capped out. The fire department, because we're still studying a potential step plan for them, we are not recommending that the fire department, any of the employees who are sworn officers in the fire department, would receive the 2.2% COLA. That decision will be made probably in August or September when the management brings to you a series of workshops to discuss the possible pay plan for them. At that time, if you adopt the pay plan, then it will be made retroactive to the start of the fiscal year. If you do not adopt the step plan, then the 2.2% COLA will be made retroactive to the beginning of the fiscal year. The only employee in the fire department that would receive the 2.2% COLA at the time that the new fiscal year starts is an administrative position, and that's one person. The other part is, of course, the discussion about moving the pay scales 1.1%. And then, as you'll recall, we have minor adjustments to the fee schedule. You did not support the changes in the fees for the athletic programs, so those were not incorporated, nor did you support the fee changes relative to before and after school programs. But tonight you come in a position where we're ready now to turn it back to you and ask if you have any other questions relative to the fiscal year budget. If not, then we would ask you to take action relative to it.
Council, any questions regarding what you've heard so far on the budget? So this time we will entertain a motion to adopt the budget as well as the fee schedule and amendments to the capital improvement plan.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the budget as presented and the fee schedule.
Second. Should be budgets, really.
Budgets.
Budgets.
Second. And the capital improvement plan.
Third.
We have a first. We have a motion and a second. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion before we take the vote on this? All right, hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Budget is unanimous.
We'd like to take just a moment to talk about the budget process. The management really appreciates the fact that you trust us. Over the last 2 weeks, I had the opportunity to do a little bit of reading, which is not something I have to admit I do very often. But one of the books that I read was talking about the power of trust. And I can tell you that as John and I are your staff and the other 560 employees, we really value the trust that you put in us. And so I will tell you that as we move forward with this budget, we pledge to you our very best efforts to give quality service. The other thing I'd like for you to think about, we are a caring community and we've been clean and green. But I got to reading, and one of the things that I would like for us to stress in the coming years together is making Jacksonville the residence of choice. Making Jacksonville the residence of choice. We can be a caring community, we can be clean and green, but if we continue the progress which is in your capital improvement program and continue the progress which you as the leadership of this city have given over the last many years, I truly believe that Jacksonville can be the residence of choice. Not because somebody is stationed here, not because somebody grew up here, but it can become the city of choice because it has a quality of life and people who truly provide the amenities and the quality and the caring that will make people want to live here. So again, we pledge to you our best efforts in implementing this budget.
Thank you.
What we'd like to say in response to that is, I guess we have given trust, but more importantly, I think you and the staff have earned it.
We appreciate that. Appreciate that. 911 Next Generation. I will tell you when Mike is coming up, I'm going to tell you a little story. I'm old enough to remember when we had smoke signals and blankets, that's true. But I can also remember when the 911 system was first put in. And I was working at that time as a young planner in South Florida. And we advertised it as the 911 system. We're bringing to you the 911 system. And I had a school teacher, Leela Canant, who had retired, and she called me one day and she said, I think this is a great system, but I can't use it on my phone. And I said, why not? She said, because it doesn't have an 11. And I thought, you know, marketing is a great thing, but you got to make sure that your message is something that people actually understand. So the 911 system, obviously, we didn't market it correctly. Mike's going to talk to you, though, about the next generation, because as we all know, technology is moving very rapidly. This new generation is going to bring us some new opportunities. So, Chief, if you would.
I appreciate, Mayor, Council, the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about the 911 system and where we're going with the 911 system. Just to kind of give you, this is a process that we've been going through, and we'll talk just a little bit quickly about the different times that we've had the 911 system. So basically, the basic 911 system used to be 911 caller get from a wired phone, and they'd call, it'd go to a switching station, and then it'd go to the 911 center. Well, we developed what's called Enhanced 911, and this is about in the 80s. And basically what we did is we took maps, and we used the maps to determine locations. And that was based on wired lines. So these wired lines enabled us to find out exactly where they were. And they were based upon maps that were developed by our GIS department. And so we had this enhanced 911 system so that we could know where the calls were coming from. Well, then along came cell phones. And cell phones enabled us to, when I came here back in 2004, about 40% of our calls were coming on the cell phone. Now about 78% of 911 calls come from cell phones. In fact, most people don't have wired lines anymore. This is kind of important because one of the things that happens in a cell phone is that the towers are triangulated and they give a location. And that location goes to that MSAG, which you saw before, which is the addressing grid. And it goes to the nearest point, So, for example, Where we're sitting at now might be the nearest point to Memorial Gardens. So if someone picks up a 911 makes a 911 call from their cell phone, the closest addressing point might be here at City Hall. So we could be anywhere from, from 20 feet to 200 feet to a half a mile from where that 911 call is. It's the technology at that time basically was good, except it was using two different systems. It was using the addressing system from that enhanced 911 system where we went in and used that MSAG to using cell phone technologies and the triangulation of towers. And we've always known that that has been an issue. The second thing that happened was voice over IP. So we went over voice over IP. We can't tell where those 911 calls are coming from. So we take a list of those phones and then we use that system in order to determine, like, for example, in City Hall, we would have it associated with City Hall. And we've had some issues with that. People have gone in and they've used voice over IP and the address that was listed might be City Hall when it's actually coming from the city garage. And so those things we've had to try to resolve those issues internally in how we send those phone numbers to those things. So next generation 911 comes along. So we've been working with the state. So this is really the difference in the two. And really what it boils down to is the location data. And because your cell phone has GPS coordinates. So it gives us a more accurate location. So if someone calls 911, they're injured in an accident, we're going to get much more reliable data, much more reliable location. The current analog system, what happens to our 911 system right now is that when you dial 911 from here, it goes digitally to the towers. It's converted to an analog system. And then when it gets to the switching station in Clinton, it comes over digital lines. So basically what we're going to do is change that. And what we're going to do is the state has a contract with EZNet, which is AT&T. And what they're basically going to do is they're going to have a digital signal from your cell phone to the 911 system. So what does that mean? It means better reliable location data and voice, text, and video. So if somebody is robbing a bank and they get a video, we'll be able to have that video real time sent to the 911 operator. We can't do that now because of the analog system, the analog portion in there. And that's gonna help us. I think it's gonna be a tremendous help for us in the near future. Now, North Carolina is not the only state. Most states are looking at how they transition to that next generation 911. But we thought it was important to go over this and talk about the fact that right now we're paying $10,000 per month to have that conversion done. And we've done that since 2014 when we moved into the building. Where the 911 board is reimbursing us for that money, but we're basically spending $10,000 a month for that conversion. When we transition to this AT&T network, the 911 board will be paying AT&T direct. We'll get that services, and they won't reimburse us anymore. So it's kind of a wash, but it's important to understand that this is going to give us much better capacity. And it's going to give us on the voice over IP, the video, the text, and mobile location. So North Carolina is working to do that, and one of the things that our contract with Intrado, which is the company that we have contracted with to bring the digital system from the switching station to our PSAP, our contract is up in November. And they don't really, the 911 board does not want to continue that contract because it's much more expensive than the AT&T contract. AT&T being the whole state, and they're getting discounts with bulk. So what we're really asking for is to change the contract that we have, because we signed that contract with Intrado. Not renew that contract in November and go with what the state has the AT&T network. Now that'll be a seamless, there won't be any changes to what the telecommunicators are doing. The only change is that digital line will be coming from AT&T rather than Intrado from that switching station. So we'll get digital signals from our cell phones when we call 911 all the way to our PSAP.
So that'll give you direct location no matter where they are.
Yeah, and there's been some cases where somebody's had an accident. Because of the triangulation, they weren't able to determine where it was, and it took several days to find them. So this will give us the exact location. So if the closest addressing point, especially it's going to be even more important in rural jurisdictions, but even with us, we get out on the bypass and they make that 911 call. The closest addressing point may be City Hall on the bypass, or maybe Montford Point, or maybe somewhere else. It may be the Walmart on the other side, and they could be as far north as the Sewell Bridge. So it just depends on the closest addressing point. So this system will give us a much more accurate.
Why, what was it, 21 municipalities or 911 centers are not going with the state on this? Why?
Yeah, the map kind of shows that there's no decision from 12 of those centers now. But I really think that there's not an understanding of what that means to them. And the fact that I think we're a little bit ahead of the game because we've already trained our telecommunicators. We already use the type of software that is used. In fact, the AT&T, the EZNet system, has a contract with 2 providers, ViperNet they call it, which is one, and then the system we're using right now. So we'll continue, our telecommunicators won't see any real difference, and the only difference they'll see is a much better location data. And I think really those 12 PSAPs that have no decision right now, really it's based because they don't understand what the process is.
What is the green approved for migrating?
Those are the ones that are moving right now. They have 42 active projects right now. Onslow County is one of them. Their goal is to, when we met with the 911 board 2 weeks ago, their goal is to put us and move us in the county at exactly the same time, so that we'll be a digital system with the county.
Bottom line, though, is you move from analog to digital.
Right.
You're going to get better GPS location, and the cost to the city is exactly the same.
Right.
And,
Well, yes.
And in this case, instead of the city being paid up front and then being reimbursed, the city will no longer be making that payment. It'll come straight to the carrier from the 911.
Right. And we're looking at a hosted solution, and the hosted solution right now, the servers that translate the data are located in our 911 center. The 911 board has a number of centers across the state. So the benefit to that is it'll be in the cloud and it'll give us some redundancy. So theoretically, I can go to any place that is on the system at this time and answer our 911 calls from that particular system. So there is some benefit as far as the backup systems are concerned.
What does that mean? As far as is down, it'll reroute?
All I have to do is, because it's IP based, I'll just get on there. And it'll
Switch
be like,
it to one of theirs.
Yeah. It'll be just like when we come here to City Hall, because it's a dedicated network. If I come here to City Hall and I log in, it's the same as I'm logging in my office. So it's just the same kind of technology, really, because it's a network system. And we chose the hosted solution because we thought it was important, especially with all the issues we had at the hurricane, that if there was a catastrophic event, especially to the Center for Public Safety, then we could go somewhere inland to answer those 911 calls until we could resolve whatever that issue is here. It won't change any of our capacity. It won't change any of our, and the only thing we're asking is that the city manager engage with AT&T and allow them to start building out that network for us.
When you say engage, you're probably
A letter.
indicating some type of contractual relationship?
Actually, it's just a letter saying that you're, as the director of the PSAP, giving us permission to build that network
I
out.
think it'd be appropriate there if the council voted to approve this movement into the new system, to have a record.
I'll make a motion to approve the transition to the AT&T state system.
Second.
Discussion.
I'll third.
We have a third discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you. I think it really is a huge, when you really think where we were, I know the mayor could probably tell you, I mean, when we answered 911 calls back then, they were all wired. It was a lot easier. And now the technology has really changed to make us more effective when we start.
He still had the phone with the crank on it.
Well, the difference in an analog system compared, it takes us 7 seconds for all that system to go through the analog system right now. When they transition us, it'll be 0.5 seconds. So when we talk about seconds and getting them to the scene as quickly as we can, every second helps. And so I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Good job.
Very good report.
I'd like to also talk with you a minute about an agreement with Jones Onslow relative to dark fiber. And Anthony has brought not just dark fiber, but multicolored fiber. So Anthony, talk to us about fiber optic.
This has received a lot of attention since I've been here, honestly, if I could have the remote, sir. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. We're going to continue along the theme of technology. And one of the reasons why we're able to drop that analog communication latency rate from 7 seconds down to, what was it? 0.5 is because of this stuff right here. This is fiber optic cable, and this is something that we've invested in heavily over the years and will continue to, hopefully, as our capacities grow and as our communication needs grow. But want to spend a few minutes of your time talking about an opportunity that we have to partner with Jones Onslow on what I call some latent capacity that we have in our fiber system. And the intent is to share fiber for the mutual benefit of us as well as them, as well as the community in general. Before we talk about the agreement itself, I want to just give a broad overview of our current fiber optic network system. So we've talked about fiber many times, mainly project to project, or we're doing this, we're doing that with fiber, but we've never really showed you how much we actually have. For a community our size, we've got a very impressive network. 41 miles total of cable exactly like that. And it's either above ground, overhead, suspended from the power poles, or a lot of times we try to put it underground where it needs to be protected from various things. Of course, other than people digging, which is often a problem for our cable. However, the infrastructure that we have, in my opinion, was a great blessing because of the fact that we got it as part of another partnership. And that's one of the things that we continue to emphasize in transportation is not only partnership with DOT, but with others. When we began planning the city's ITS system, we knew that DOT was going to have to run communication all over our major roadway system. And so we asked them the question, could we partner with you to install some fiber to support our needs? And the answer was yes. Of course, we'd be happy to do that. To further expand on that, they said, we'll even go so far as doing the work for you for free. And so anywhere that we're planning to run fiber optic cable, we'll be happy to run whatever you want, whatever count you want, right alongside of ours for simply the cost of material. And so about 35%, or not 35%, 35 miles of that 41 were installed for about $200,000. So for those who are familiar with fiber and how much it costs, Mr. Lazar, I know that you're very much aware. That was an amazing bargain for us. And that's, again, how we ended up with so much fiber to connect so many of our assets. We connect everything from city buildings, public safety, public services, city hall. We also connect water tanks, lift stations, wells. I'm missing some other stuff, Wally, I'm sure. But the main thing is it gives us very reliable, very fast communication to assets that otherwise we'd either have to monitor with personnel, sending them out to monitor wells and water tanks, or we would have to lease communications, say from Spectrum or from CenturyLink, et cetera, to get the communication that we need. So moving on to the purpose of this agreement, the intent is to share what I call latent capacity, and I'll expand on that here in just a minute, for our collective, our mutual benefit, okay? And I passed the cable around, and I'm sure you're all able to look at it and notice that it probably doesn't look like what you expected. When you put fiber optic cable in the air and the ground, it's not just simply one cable. It's a package of a lot of strands that are contained within smaller cables. And the benefit of fiber is that you can get them in very large packages. For instance, this one is a 96 count cable, but you can get them in very small packages as well. Anytime that we invest in fiber these days, we feel that the cost benefit is around 96, okay? And to connect an asset, generally you only need 1 to 2 fibers per asset. So when we put a 96 count in the ground or in the air, we're building in some capacity for what we need today, as well as what we need for the future. But then it goes without saying that because we have 96 of them, there is some latent capacity there as well. Capacity that's just there because we put a 96 in the ground. And that's what we want to really take advantage of here on our side as well as Jones Onslow's side. They're particularly interested from a smart metering and a substation communication standpoint. So just like we want to communicate with tanks, like we want to communicate with lift stations, they want to actively monitor how their substations are doing all the time. That helps with efficiency, that helps with system reliability, etc. Smart metering technology is just the wave of the future. And they're looking at it, Duke is looking at it, we're potentially looking at it as well. The agreement, once it's in place, if it's in place, will allow them to spread that smart metering technology over a wider area with a minimal amount of capital upfront cost. And from our perspective, one key thing that we want to accomplish, we need better communication to the firing range. And the chief is here, he can probably confirm that, but right now we're operating on a very limited bandwidth, and because of the remoteness of the fire station, there are some reliability issues, so to speak. Jones Onslow has a cable, a fiber cable that runs right past the firing range, and if we're able to tap into that cable just by going across the road, we can get fully robust hardwire connectivity all the way back to the Center for Public Safety and over here to City Hall. So that's a very key benefit. It's not just our benefit, it's not just their benefit, it's of course shared. As far as terms go, we have worked with them to determine what a fair per rate mile is. And I call it a per rate mile with an offset in it. And I probably won't I'll use an example to explain what that means because I probably couldn't do it effectively any other ways. So in phase one, if we choose to embark on this with Jones Onslow, in phase one, we would share with them 15 miles of fiber optic cable, okay? In turn, they would share with us 2 miles of their fiber optic cable. So essentially, we're matching 2 miles of fiber optic cable, with 13 being kind of the residual that we are sharing with them. The monthly bill that we would send them would be for that 13 miles. So we're not billing back and forth for the matching 2 miles of fiber that we're sharing. Hopefully did that make sense? Okay. There is no transfer of ownership. We will keep all of our assets. They will keep all of their assets. No network connectivity. This is not a broadband agreement, so we are not providing them with data. We are simply providing them one or more of these little fiber tubes so that they can connect their systems with their assets on our fiber. It also relates to cybersecurity, so no interconnection between our servers and their servers. We don't have to worry about security issues. The agreement would also set up an arrangement where we can conduct maintenance on their behalf. So we have the ability to service fiber optic cable, and unfortunately we have to do it quite often. People dig it up and break it, and of course we have to go out there and fix it. Our traffic signal guys are very proficient. They have all the hardware equipment necessary. One thing we did caveat with Jones Onslow is that we probably don't have the capacity to be their #1 go-to. And in fact, our priority is Jacksonville. So we're always going to prioritize our needs first. So they have a contractor in place that will be their #1 call if anything happens on their system. But we always want to have a backup plan in case plan #1 doesn't work. We would become our backup plan, become their backup plan. And what that would do is that would add to the amount of revenue. We would charge them separately for any services that we provide. This is a new type of arrangement for us and Jones Onslow. The agreement itself is based upon a template, I would say, that we got from some of our contacts. But once you see the agreement, you'll notice that some of the terms are just intending for us to move forward in good faith. You know, we've never done this before, so we wrote this contract the best that we could. But as community partners, Jones Onslow and the city, we feel comfortable moving forward in good faith on some of those terms because there is significant mutual benefit for both of us to make this work. The agreement would be in place for 5 years as an initial term and then a second 5 years if we choose to renew. This is not a lease, okay? This is a service agreement. So at the end of the 10-year term, we could choose to renew for longer if we so choose. As with any agreement that we put out there, there are also termination clauses available. So if for whatever reason we want to terminate, we can do that with notification. They can do that as well. So what does it look like on the ground? Phase 1 includes the 15 miles that I referenced before. So the blue line basically shows the extent of our network. The green shows what we would basically share with them as our initial surge. This gets them communication from the headquarters on Western all the way out Piney Green to a substation, same thing on Ramsey, and also out to Gum Ranch Road. What's not shown on the screen here is the 2 miles that we would share, that they would share with us on Dawson Cabin Road to get us out to the firing range. So that map just wouldn't be legible at this scale, so we didn't put it on there. Phase 2 would expand it by another 12 miles. That'll get us to a total of 27. You can see we're going further out Gum Ranch Road. We're going out Marine Boulevard, 258, 24, all the way to Burton Park. Now, one thing that you probably notice, if you compare Phase 1 to Phase 2, you can see that here on Phase 1, the Gum Ranch infrastructure ends at Ramsey Road. That's currently where it ends today. But just as you have approved the capital improvement program for next fiscal year, that includes some funding to extend the fiber optic system from Ramsey Road all the way out to some wells that we have near Rock Creek. We're going to build in some latent capacity to that infrastructure and then be able to get almost an instant return on the investment by leasing some of it back to Jones Onslow. Financial impact, this is not going to balance the city's budget, but it is what we feel is a fair amount for what is being provided. So with phase one, the total amount would be $630 per month. And then once we get to phase two, that'll be $1,250 a month.
That's not per mile, that's for the total system.
That is for the total system, yes, sir. And the good news on our part is that the $1,250 per month will more than cover the amount of effort that we have to put into supporting this agreement. So the amount that they're paying us will offset all of our costs associated. Then maintenance and repair, that'll come as incremental cost in addition to those per month rates. So if they have a fiber that's cut and they want us to go out and fix it, we'll certainly do that, and then per the city's fee schedule, we will bill them back accordingly for those services.
So if you look at, Gail doesn't let me do math in public, so I'm going to do it pretty simply. Over a 5-year period, the city's going to get back about $6,000. I'm sorry, it would be.
That's why she doesn't let you do math.
We're going to get about $14,000 a year, and in 5 years, then we're going to get back about $70,000. And you're saying that so far the council has invested about $200,000 in the whole system that you've described. So in a 5-year period, they're going to get about 1/3 of that money back.
Easily, yes.
How did you come up with those numbers?
Well, honestly, we backed into it for what it would cost us plus some to support the program. If you recall, when we budgeted for traffic signals this year, we included a certain amount of revenue that was needed to support an additional person that we needed for our team. So with that number in mind, that was our target. We essentially backed into it, and it happened to be a reasonably competitive rate for the asset that we're offering.
So for that amount of money, they're getting one strand?
Well, we're going to work with them on that. The intent is that minimum they would get 2 strands.
2 strands.
Mm-hmm. So
What do you call a strand?
not 2 of these.
No.
They would get
actually 2 of those.
2 of these.
Okay, when you say 96, you're talking about 96 of those.
Right. This is a 96 count fiber, so it has 96 of these guys, and you probably can't even see it on camera, they're so fine. But these are the individual fiber optic strands.
So they're getting, so currently we have 41 miles of fiber optic
Yes, sir.
that we own.
Mm-hmm.
We are gonna give them, or for lack of a better word, lease them, let them use 2 strands at minimum. What is the maximum?
Well, the maximum at this point is 2.
Okay.
So the base agreement is
So
2.
2
If they
strands.
needed to go beyond 2, then we would have to revisit this rate.
And so we're gaining the 2 miles that we do not have
Yes, sir.
to get to the firing range.
That's correct.
Okay.
Well,
So
you consider,
Go ahead.
go ahead, no, please.
So basically, we're getting the 2 miles to the firing range. And we're gonna receive in 5 years roughly $70,000 for a 2-strand allowance.
Right. And again, that could be revisited because if you look at the 96 count fiber here, we're probably using 12 of them in total for our purposes. So again, there's lots of latent capacity in there that we could offer. If they decide that they need it, we could go back to the table and say, okay, well, we need 4 here and we need 6 here, that kind of thing. And then, of course, those
The only
numbers.
thing I'm saying is, it sounds great, but even though we only invested $200,000, I think the value is considerably more in terms of what you would normally spend to put 41 miles of fiber network.
Oh, certainly.
So I just hope that we just keep that in mind and we don't just carte blanche give out strands for a low fee.
Right.
Because it's very valuable.
Well, this is actually,
And we're only gaining 2 miles, we're really only gaining one connectivity.
and that's a fair enough point. You're exactly right. We want to be appealing, but we also want to be competitive, right? So that we're not underselling the asset. We did back into the number, but at the same time, we got this information from MC. I'm sure you're familiar with them. And these rates are comparable to the rates that they are charging their customers for similar types of infrastructure.
Okay, so you're saying you backed into it and it bounced it against their number and they were reasonably comparable?
Yes.
Well, if you compare it to a typical business for fiber optic, they're paying for basic fiber, $400 a month.
Right, that comes with data.
With data, this is no data.
Right, this is zero data, this is just the data.
As long as it's competitive and mutual, again, even though we spent 200, the value of what we have is way, way, way more than that.
And even though we're not,
we know that.
even though we're not generating revenue off of all the ones that we are
Not yet.
using, right, not yet. Well, that's a totally different discussion where that might go one day. But even though that we're not generating revenue off of the ones that we use internally, it is saving us a lot of money because most of those assets that we are now able to provide service to with our infrastructure, we were leasing fiber from Spectrum or CenturyLink, and those were commercial rates. So just like the home, I mean, we might have gotten somewhat of a break as a large consumer, but think about how much you pay for internet at home every single month, and then think about having X number of accounts all over the city. That is definitely a tangible savings to us just by having this.
I'd like to know a little more about what the firing range, why that's so critical that we need to have fiber optics run out to that, just from my understanding.
Mike?
Well, I'm glad we have the chief here.
Yeah.
Well,
It's not because we have bad people, they're bad aims.
Well, we've had a couple issues out there with the phone lines, basically trying to get a solid phone line out there, and that worries us just a little bit because if they're out there shooting, they need the cell phone coverage out there is very spotty. So that's part of the issue. The other issue is that the gate and some of the electronics are run over the internet. So if we have to open the gate for a service person or we open the gate for other people that are having class, that's all done from City Hall. So the gate system, the alarm system, everything runs over those lines. So we really struggled. We've had CenturyLink out there. We've had CenturyLink services for a while. We have Spectrum now, and we still have spotty service out there. So hopefully this will help us, be able to control everything like we do for every other city facility from here. The key card gets us in. The key card gets us in the building. We don't have keys, so it's all done from City Hall. So we've really struggled because of the just I guess bad luck with the location as far as connectivity.
So if you need service work and for whatever reason you can't open the gate, somebody has to drive out.
Yeah, somebody has to go out there and use the
and
key.
open the gate and come back.
And same with the issues of getting inside the building if they're teaching classes or getting inside the gate if they're
It's just
teaching
not
classes.
connecting or working.
Yeah, we struggle sometimes just depending on
The day.
the day, really.
Oh, and Chief, forgive me, I forgot the little girl's name. When we used the firing range, if I remember correctly, for like a remote command for search and rescue.
Well, actually, when the little girl went missing
Right.
on Dawson Cabin, the sheriff's office used that as a location. We had to set up some satellites because the because the service.
The bandwidth was too narrow to support what they needed at that location.
But for us, on an everyday basis, it's key card to get in, key card to get in the building. It's the phone line in case something were to happen. It's, you know, getting the range master, getting his schedule and being able to get his emails. And we've just had a rough time with both those services, either CenturyLink or, I don't know why, but we've struggled with it out there.
I think what might be a benefit to you when we get back together in August is to have a workshop that shows you all of the facilities that the city does own that are connected by fiber and give you an update on that. I also think it's important for the council to establish a policy as to how much of your fiber system you wind up, for lack of a better term, leasing to others. Because while $200,000 is a lot of money, it was a great investment because it came along at a time we could piggyback with others. What you don't want to do is, if I can use the term, be penny wise and pound foolish, in that you wind up leasing so many of the dark fibers to others, and then 10 years from now you find that suddenly you got to invest $1 million. So I think it's important for council to set some policy guidelines with this. This evening, of course, you've heard what I think Anthony's done a good job with analyzing this joint venture. I think the policy should also look at the type of entities that we would joint venture with, because I certainly don't feel that it's where we want to go to get into the cable business, quote unquote, but where we can partner with the school or with the county or with a major utility partner like this. But those are all policy statements that I think we need to bring back some policy guidelines for you to consider.
But I have no issues with
This,
what you're bringing.
this is the first and probably what will continue to grow, because we know there is interest from other partners out there, particularly governmental entities like OMWASA and the school system and others, to try to tap into our fiber at certain locations to help not necessarily give themselves primary connectivity, but maybe some redundancy in their communication. So this certainly sets the precedent, but I agree with Richard in the fact that moving forward, before we open the floodgates, we'll need to set some parameters around how much and who and, you know, what the actual costs are going to be, because some of those investments, the capital side of it may need to happen from the other end of the agreement. So for instance, if we don't have a fiber to the front door of, say, OMWASA, like we do to the front door of Jones Onslow, they might actually need to go in and pay for that upfront capital cost. So putting some parameters around this is definitely appropriate. Moving forward, Jones Onslow would like to move forward with the agreement, and I think the staff supports that. The intent is to continue their rollout of the smart metering technology. It started in Bryn Mawr already, so you might have, if you know anybody that lives in that area, they might have mentioned it to you. I can guarantee you, as more and more of these smart meters go in, more and more people will be calling City Hall wanting to know what's going on and so far and so forth. But we will have this on the council agenda, barring any concerns, of course. We will have this on the council agenda for consideration on the 18th. If it is favorable at that point, phase 1 will begin almost immediately, and it would continue from 2019, that's calendar 19, into early 2020, and then phase 2 would probably wrap up before the end of 2020. As I mentioned, we both continue to bolster our fiber networks. The good thing about it is that we're doing this in a coordinated fashion. We spend time with them on a quarterly basis, talking about where they're putting fiber, where we're planning to put fiber. So the intent would be to maximize opportunities in the future and help to reduce any redundancy and effort as far as capital expense.
Question, if Jones Onslow, I guess Duke Energy, are you doing the same
Yes, sir.
sort of coordination?
As far with fiber, not so much. but certainly with regard to our electrical accounts and other items that we have going on with Duke.
They're not pursuing the smart tech, the metering.
Duke they control their own destiny. We'll just say it that way.
So they don't like to partner. They'd rather do their own thing,
Right.
is what you're trying to tell me in a nice way.
So without the 2 miles, would this have come up at all?
Probably.
If they hadn't had,
Very likely.
so they approached us?
Well, it actually, we have quarterly meetings with them to talk about a variety of things because we have, streetlights, electrical accounts, new services, that kind of thing. This just basically came up in passing as an opportunity. They were faced with a significant capital cost of, putting fiber all over the city basically to connect with their substations. We had the fiber already in existence, and by sharing it, that helps them certainly, helps the community at large, but then it also gets us access to some areas that we currently do not have fiber to. So
What is cable? What is that buried a mile? Do you have a number off the top of your head? I know it varies, but just general.
it's expensive these days, so we wouldn't direct bury it anymore. Unfortunately, we did that one time, and that's the one that keeps getting dug up. So we have to keep going out and fixing it. To put conduit in the ground, you're looking at probably $7 to $12 a foot. And then
That's directional bore.
that's for a directional bore. And then to put the fiber inside of it, you're looking probably $2 a foot. And then to do the splicing, meaning connect the ends of each one of these little strands to the ends of other little strands, that's anywhere from $45 to $75 a splice. That's why we have this capability in-house, because it's extremely expensive to do this work with a contractor. I think that's why it was very appealing to them.
You'll also recall that several years ago, we started a program that you endorsed. When we install major water and sewer systems, we simply put in extra PVC. There's not anything in them, but as we do it, for example, and hopefully in the next year when we work out here on New Bridge Street, putting in new water lines, we're going to be putting in simply a vacant PVC so that at some point in the future you can run fiber optics through those lines. And that's what we've done. That's pretty much our standard operating policy, because the cost of the PVC is practically nothing. It's the cost of the excavator and the labor.
In that particular case, it's simply the cost of the material. But if you're putting it in just as conduit itself, again, it's several dollars a linear foot.
That's worth about $1 million to Jones Onslow if they had to do the work themselves, and they're getting it for $70,000 spread over 5 years. That's pretty decent. 70,000, yeah, total of 70,000. Yes, spread over 5 years. Pretty good deal for them.
But again, it's comparable
Right,
with market rates that,
I
say,
understand.
NC would
As long
offer.
as it's, I don't mind selling below market rate as long as it's not too far below market rate. I don't want to give it away. Want to help a community partner, but we certainly don't want to subsidize their business.
Sure.
Well, that's been our philosophy relative to the water tanks and all of the communication repeaters that we put up there. Several years ago, I would venture to say we were not where we should be, and now we're making substantial money every year. Gail, do you remember how much we make off those?
It's over $1 million.
There's several contracts.
Yes, we make very nice money. I will also mention to you, going back to Jones Onslow, that you will recall maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we talked with an outside vendor about possibly reading our water accounts. Technology continues to advance. In the budget which you've approved this evening, we have some new reading technology before we buy it. We're going to be discussing again with Jones Onslow about, okay, is it possible for us to do some things jointly relative to reading our water bills? We don't know that that's going to be beneficial, but we just want to show you that that's the type of communications we try to continue to look at, because You stressed to us the 3 E's, and we take those very seriously. And we think that with technology moving forward, if you can read electric meters off of some type of aerial system, maybe you can be reading water meters off of those too. And we'll be bringing your reports.
And when revenue's tight, it's nice to be able to generate some additional revenue. Not that we're in the business making revenue, but again, it helps to offset the taxes that folks pay. So that's what I said. We just long we don't give it away.
Yes, sir.
Not like that car commercial on TV. Any other thoughts?
We're gonna have a workshop on this later and talk about the uses and so on.
Yes, sir.
I'll reserve my question for capacities. I'd like to know more about that.
We will prepare something for an August workshop that will really look at the issue and give us education. But Anthony, thanks for the good work on this.
Yes,
When
sir.
you
While we
plan-
have,
When would you plan on having policies developed?
we'll do that during the month of July, so that when we get back together with you in August, we can be looking at some draft policies and see if that's where you're comfortable. We'll also contact others and see how because we're not the only one who does this. While Anthony's with us, I'd like to move to the second issue, or the third issue on the workshop, which is Memorial Grove and wayfinding. So
Before
please.
he starts on that, he asked me to ask a question in the workshop. The status Henderson Drive, we're getting, I'm sure, I know I'm getting a lot, I'm sure others are getting a lot too.
All of us are.
What's the current status on Henderson Drive?
It's under
Well,
construction.
It's not finished yet, right?
Thank you.
That's really the short answer, but the more precise answer is it should be done soon. Wally, if
Well, that's
last thing I heard was it was be done. That's right, I practiced
Yeah,
that
that was
one.
our last one, and that's what I shared with some of the folks who asked me within the May, so they're now coming back to me and say, how
Which
soon?
May?
Is it, and I told them, I said, it's not the end of May yet. I mean, just,
Technically,
obviously,
yes.
since they're not done, it's not the end of May, so.
Well, we're shooting for the end of June. That's actually the correct answer. I spoke with Andrew, who's the project manager, and Wally, please correct me if I'm saying anything that's wrong here, but the holdup for the past few weeks has been certification of the water line, doing all the testing to make sure it was safe to connect the services to the new main. That's been done from what he said, and now basically all that we have to do is to finish connecting over all the services and do the patching of the roadway. So his best estimate was another 30 days.
Okay, that's just our part.
Yes, sir.
Then comes the DOT part.
Have you got any feedback from?
That's a year off.
Well, the DOT is standing by, and they know that we're concerned about the condition of the roadway. They are concerned as well. We have two options, and it really depends on when we actually finish up this project and where they are in their resurfacing program when we're done. They don't want to come in immediately and start patching for obvious reasons. They want to, we've talked about this before, they want the road to settle so that we're not putting in fresh asphalt and it's subsiding.
You used the word patching. Did you mean patching or paving? You said the DOT doesn't want to come in immediately and patch.
Okay, so they don't want to cut, okay, thank you for catching me on that. They don't want to come in immediately and mill and resurface the entire roadway until the patches that we have put in place have had the opportunity to settle,
And
okay?
how long would that be?
Well, it really depends. They want it to be long enough but short enough. Long enough that it actually happens, but short enough that, you know, we're taking care of the roadway and the traveling public. So to answer that question,
Please.
if their contractor for their annual resurfacing program is still active, say later in the fall, there is a chance that they would bring that contractor back and do all of Henderson Drive at that time, okay? If the
Well, that's
contractor...
better. We were originally told a year after.
Well, that's the worst case scenario, okay? So if that contractor finishes early and that's not an option for us, then DOT is going to put it on the next contract, which would start resurfacing early next spring. So it would be March or April timeframe before we get fresh asphalt out there.
But I think it's, for the public's purpose, it is reasonable to think that by the 4th of July or somewhere close to that, that all of the digging will be finished for the moment, that the patching will be in place, that the barrels and barricades will be gone, that it may still be a rough road to ride, but it won't have all of the impediments.
Most people are just looking for 4 lanes of traffic right now, at least from the feedback that I've gotten. That should happen within the next 30 days.
Anthony, in your
Sir.
contacts with DOT, what do they say they're gonna do as far as the pavement is concerned? Are they gonna leave 2 lanes open, or?
As far as when they're actually paving themselves, so they're probably gonna do the work at night. That's very customary for them. They will neck down 1 lane at a time, mill 1 lane, pave 1 lane, because they don't leave exposed milling overnight, or over the day. Whatever they mill, they want to have paved come the morning. So they'll do 1 lane at a time, and we'll see this process on Gum Branch Road in the next few weeks, because they're going to start mid-June on Gum Branch. They'll do all the work at night. They'll probably start in the outside lanes and then work towards the inside. And Gum Branch is supposed to take about 8 weeks. Hopefully Henderson wouldn't take that long once they get underway. But during the day, there should be 4 lanes of traffic open on the roadway.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Wayfinding.
For the past couple of months, we've been working with the Tourism Development Authority on some new concepts for our Beirut Memorial Grove site markers, as well as our directional wayfinding. So I wanted to show both of those to you, hopefully get some feedback on the Memorial Grove signs to move forward with construction, and then just get some general feedback on the directional wayfinding. So the current design looks like this. And as you recall, over the years, we've had several other designs that we've presented, but for one reason or another, we had to kind of move past those. This design today, we feel, is very practical. It's very affordable. It gets to the point of what we're trying to accomplish out there, which is informing the general public of what the site stands for. And really, it's just a good-looking sign. The concept is for a monument-style sign with a brick veneer on it. It would have a concrete cap that's either white or light gray in color. It'd be a total of 50 feet long and about a little over 4 foot tall from basically the bottom of the brick to the top of the cap. The design would, left from right, would basically disappear into an embankment that we would construct as part of the project. Landscaping, you can see, will basically surround the entire sign, and it would be lit with a solar fixture. Some of the areas out there that we want to, well, one of the areas in particular that we want to construct these is very remote. It's very challenging to get commercial power to, so solar is our only option. The letters themselves would be raised steel powder-coated letters, and they would have a touch of retroreflectivity to them. So as you drive by them with your vehicle, even if the solar lighting wasn't working, you would be able to see what the sign actually says. Concept includes 2 locations where we install these signs. One is what I call the south lawn area. So if you're on the bypass heading south towards Wilmington, it's the one basically at the bottom of the screen there. The other one is on the upper lawn section, which is on 17 Business, Wilmington Highway, Marine Boulevard, whatever you want to call it, in that area heading into Jacksonville. Now the intent there is to catch the eye of as many motorists as possible, but because of some of the bridging and the distances, we're not going to be able to get to all of them. The option that we have designed currently has a curved face sign. There was discussion about a straight face sign and the fact that that might save in some material cost. Really, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, but the TDA did support the curved face sign. One benefit of this is it would minimize the number of trees that we would have to relocate. Now, either of the trees or either of the options that we went with would impact some of the trees. Under both scenarios, we would relocate them. None of them are going to be removed because, of course, the number is very important. It's representative of all those servicemen.
The actual cost of these?
The conservative estimate at this point for both of them fully constructed is $120,000. And we had $150,000 for the budget. We are in talks with Parks right now to see what parts of the project they might be willing to do. The landscaping, the grading, all of that is certainly within their capabilities. If we chose to go that route, that would probably significantly reduce the cost.
And the funding?
This is funding from the Tourism Development Authority. Is this pink or green money?
It's pink money.
It's pink money. So it's promotional money, correct?
Yes.
The request of the council?
The request is feedback on the sign. If you like it, we're designed. We've got good cost estimates. We're basically ready to put it out to bid. If you would like to see some adjustments, we could certainly take that in consideration as well and go back to the drawing board and see what we can do.
Council?
Fine with me.
Good. All right, the last thing, and of course, we're not looking for any decision on this tonight, but just wanted to make you aware of some prototypes for wayfinding that we've been able to install. This one here is on Court Street heading down towards Sturgeon City. I have to caveat both of these and the fact that they are temporary installations. This is not what the final product is going to look like. They are on shorter wood poles right now, but again, this is just a concept or a proof of concept. The final installation would be on a square aluminum pole that's powder coated to match the back color of the sign itself.
So actually the signs are what we're proposing. It's just the mounting technique is not.
The signs are what we're proposing, yes. The mount would be a lot different. So in areas on city streets, we have a lot more flexibility with our design, okay? And that's why we can be more creative with a sign like this. It has more information on it, more colors than, say, a sign like this that you would see out on major roadways, DOT corridors, where they have very specific guidelines that we have to comply with.
Is the small Jacksonville underneath, is that legible when you drive by? Is that something that we need? I mean, I'm not saying it's expensive or anything, but if you can't see it as you're driving by, why have it? So.
Well, and I agree with you, sir. It is something that we can, it doesn't make or break the sign.
No, but if it's not of no benefit, why put on it? And my thought there was if you could drop that down and make your logo up top, which is much more identifiable and much more well-known throughout the city, I think
Sure.
might be an asset.
Well, a fundamental question might be, how many times do we need to say Jacksonville on the sign?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's one of the things that kind of struck my attention when we put them up out there. It does say Jacksonville on there twice. I'm not sure that we need that. That is something we can definitely look at.
But I like the fact that we're getting some wayfinding. One of my concerns about the Bay Grove, Memorial Grove, is the fact that we're moving it from where it's well known for 30-some years, and now we're trying to get people to shift their attention to the Grove now, and unless we draw some attention, they're not going to make the connection between the two. So.
Sure. Some feedback that we got from the TDA was also about consistency in how we handle the top of the sign. So you can see on this one we have more of a dome shape. On this one we have what I call kind of a top hat shape. The TDA did tend to support the top hat more so than the dome. The fact that it does allow that city seal to be more pronounced. So moving forward, that's very likely what we will pursue as the next concept for this one, but they did really like that sign.
Would like to also thank Mr. Lazara. Obviously, he's not only in the pizza business, but he's in the sign business, and he's given us a lot of very good mentoring relative to the quality of the product and the way it's put together. And I think you are pleased with the materials we're proposing.
Yes. The end, excuse me. The end result's gonna be really, really nice. It'll be really nice.
Also, I would mention that the initial cost estimates for these signs from the study was substantial. And through the redesign, the work of Mr. Lazara, Anthony, and others has brought these down substantially. This sign is going to cost how much?
This sign is $1,500.
And some of the original signs were?
The lower cost option of some of our other signs were $3,800.
Yeah, I don't think you could have got it for 38. I mean, they were expensive.
That was for the stripped down version of the one that, yes. So
What are they made of?
this is, I don't remember the gauge, it's
It's
basically,
all aluminum. It's
quarter.
all powder coated aluminum, but it's very heavy. Each one of those are
about 100 pounds.
durable, very durable.
Yeah, we would
If
encourage
you get a chance to go look at it, go up to it and really look at it. And again, once you add the aluminum post and, you know, the final look, it's gonna really stand out very nice.
So well in the weather.
And the thing about the Jacksonville, if I just may add, it just balances out the sign. If you take that off, you have to kind of move everything, and you can't really make the logo much bigger because it'll be out of balance based on the size of the sign. And that's just a visual thing.
Sure.
But it'll get out of whack with the top of this. You see how the top is? How it goes around? If you make that logo any bigger, it won't look right in that. That's one of the hardest things to do, is to put logos in when you have a rounded edge to work from.
Sure.
Limited area to put a logo.
Well, again, these are prototypes.
Yes, we
This
can
is
change-
intended to be a proof of concept because you never really know what something looks like until you do it and install it. So I think this is a good initial effort. I think we could manage some polishing on both of them. I know that we have to get more feedback from DOT on some of these major roadway signs before we're 100% on what we can and can't do. Again, the feedback from the TDA here on the shape of the top, does the council feel one way or the other on that? The word they used was consistency, which came
That's the
from,
word the attorney
we
likes to
know
use.
exactly where that word came from. Any strong feelings one way or the other?
Yeah.
Top hat.
Top
The
hat.
top end, okay.
Now, I had some feedback already on this sign.
Sure.
They feel it's inaccurate almost. It's
Okay.
something about the location. I don't know who decides all that, you know, which signs go where.
The location on this one is a little bit challenging because we didn't want to put it in somebody's front yard.
Right, but in
And-
the sense.
and
But it's
so-
not final, neither one of these.
Yeah,
the
the
positionings
positionings
aren't
aren't
final.
final, it's just a.
Once we get a little bit further down the line, we will have conversations with the property owners. Of course, we also want to be able to show them the final product,
Right.
you know, and not change the game on them midway. So this is further than we would want it from the actual intersection that this is referring to. But again, it is just the proof of concept. Same thing, wrong direction. Same thing with this one. This one is actually further off the right of way than we would want it to be. And we actually worked with the county to get special permission to install that on a temporary basis. Once we get 100% approval from DOT, it will go closer to the roadway edge.
And on this particular sign, we had actually intended it to be down here almost at the red light so that the arrows would actually be pointing towards the post office and City Hall. But again, I commend the group for the excellent work. One of the things that we need to do, though, is move forward as quickly as possible on those relative to Sturgeon City. I'll remind everybody that I think it's the middle of June, we're gonna have the opening of Sturgeon City. They're gonna need to be leasing it, and we need to get the directional signs. We're not going to try to buy hundreds of these things at one time. We're going to get a reasonable order and get them installed in the downtown area, probably first. I think we're still working on.
The intent
plan
is
for
to
that.
start downtown because that's really the easiest for us to execute on. We don't need any special permission from DOT. We can start downtown. Of course, that probably makes the most logistical sense anyways. And then as we get approvals from DOT, we can begin moving out to some of the major roadway corridors.
I think from the TDA, you have our direction in terms of just making the top match, and we're good.
Sure.
As long as the council is saying, then it gives you direction.
That's exactly what we need.
Who's gonna install these?
We haven't determined that yet. These were installed by our parks crew as well as our traffic signal crew.
So it may be possible that we will send out the bid to make the sign with an alternate to install, and then it's possible that city crews may, to assist in saving some money, city crews may install.
The way that we would roll this out is very likely, just because of the way that the manufacturing process works versus the installation. If I had my preference, we would bid out the signs, because that is a very specialized thing that only a handful of folks can actually do to this quality. We would get those signs in, and then probably initially we would use our internal crews to install the first wave of signs. And as we start to work in more complex areas, like out on the DOT rights of way, higher volumes of traffic, more utility complex, we would probably hire a contractor. Because I would prefer for us not to take on the liability of working in those environments, as well as those pretty significant utility conflicts that could occur.
Fiber optics and stuff.
Well, I'm mostly concerned about gas lines on Western Boulevard and things like. Fiber is certainly something we can deal with. We can fix that.
The only thing I would add is we just need to make sure that we take enough time and the right people involved to make sure we have the right locations picked for where they go, so that you're not having to move them after you put them up.
One step at a time. That's our philosophy on this both of these projects so far.
Good thinking.
Yes, sir.
One last comment on this. Certainly, we all should thank Glenn for the excellent work, Glenn Hargett, for the excellent work he's done. He has really worked with the TDA for a number of years. I'm very proud of the fact that he and Anthony and others have finally brought this to the point where we're going to see this get installed in the next several months.
Very good.
Thank
So
you very
we
much.
have one other item on the shelter committee, and we could either take a break or we could do the shelter committee and then take a break, because you do need to have a closed session. So what's your preference?
Let's do the last thing and then have the.
Well, if we do the shelter, then we can take have our lunch
And
break.
then the folks can
Closed
go,
session.
yeah, then they can
Yeah.
go.
Chief,
Rather than us
carry
all
on.
around.
Nice job, Anthony.
Thank you, sir.
As you'll recall,
Shelter committee.
I don't think any of us have forgotten the fact that it is hurricane season coming up, and we had the visit from Hurricane Florence.
While you were gone, it came in.
Yeah,
It's here already, yeah.
Well,
While you were gone, see?
You mean y'all let it through?
Yeah, hurricane season came.
Well, one of the outcomes of our analysis last year was the question of how do we shelter city employees who are on duty. So I asked Mike if he would lead a task force. I think he's done an excellent job of doing this. So if you'd give the council a report.
Anthony and Wally and Gail all served on that committee, and so they're here as well. So the first thing we talked about is looking at the threat and seeing what the threat may be. What are we going to plan for? So we talked a lot about what the actual threat is and what we actually would need. So when we started looking at the threat, then we also talked about what are we planning for? So we did an employee survey. How many of our employees work? So we sent this out to every employee. 118 responded. So about 72% said they were required to work during the hurricane. And then we asked them, would they use a shelter? So about 50% said that they would use a shelter if the city had one. And then we asked them how many family members they might include. And we got a lot of different responses. We also asked them how many animals they might bring as well. So we got a lot of different responses with that.
And a lot of different type of animals.
Well, anywhere from horses to goats to snakes to, you know, not just dogs and cats.
Great.
But when we started looking at that, we would have to have a shelter based upon these numbers of about 400 or 500 people. So that's based on these numbers. Then we also asked them, okay, when would you utilize the shelter? About 0% said in category 1, about 10% for category 2, 40% for category 3, and 46% for category 4, and 27%. Because we thought that some of them would heed the evacuation notice, but by far, most of them are going to be 2, 3, and 4. And basically at 4 and 5, they're going to use the evacuation order. So that gave us a kind of an idea of what we needed to plan for. And so we used FEMA's guide that talks about designing safe rooms. So when we talk about safe rooms, we're not talking about, for example, the Center for Public Safety. That building was designed for Category 5 everywhere. It wasn't designed to have a safe room in just one location. So we started looking at the safe room and started looking at the possibility of building a safe room. And we looked at planning. This is safe room design speeds. And you can see we're between 160, at the maximum, we're between 160 and 170 miles per hour winds. So that's the potential that we might face. So in our planning phases, and we start to look at the design of these safe rooms, they're going to have to withstand wind speeds about 160 to 170 miles per hour. Then we also looked at flood hazards. So flood hazards, what we looked at is are they in the flood zone? Are they will they have a potential if you have a storm surge? So we looked at a number of different things when we talked about the safe room, where the location of the city facilities are. Could we utilize certain city facilities? Are city facilities built to some standards that we could use? What we did find is that really the Center for Public Safety is the only one that has been designed to withstand winds at these kinds of winds at a Category 3, Category 4, or Category 5. We do have some challenges in some city facilities. Some city facilities are in floodplains that have some potential flooding. So we looked at all of those, and then we looked at the existing facilities and kind of made the decision as to, okay, these facilities might be capable of sustaining or being a location for a safe room. And a safe room program doesn't mean it's the entire building. It means that we're going to look at certain areas, reinforce those certain areas, and those areas would be used for the storm. So for example, we may make this room a safe room, but the entire building would not be a safe room. So, so it does cut down on the cost to some extent. And then we talked about the policies and procedures. I think it's important when we start to talk about some of the safe rooms, it's based upon a 20 square feet per person. So that is just for that room. Now 20 square feet doesn't sound like a lot of space. It's not.
Can he lay down in them?
Well, you know, but we're only talking about one room, and typically a safe room is built for a 24-hour period because that's the peak of the storm. It's interesting that the recommendations from FEMA have to do with that 20 square feet per person, and that's only for that one particular room. So theoretically, when you talk about having a safe room, you might have that 20 square foot, and during the peak of the storm, people would be in there when you're having when you're having the greatest potential for damage, and then they could use the rest of the building for that. Because 20 square feet is not a lot of space. And generally, it costs about 15 to 20% higher to retrofit a building. So we had a lot of discussion about the commons because, you know, we looked at the commons. So we said, hey, you know, the commons is a nice building. It's relatively new. It's not built to those kinds of standards. So we'd have to look at reinforcing that. And that's going to be about 15 to 20% higher than if we decided to build, say, another gym. And I'm not advocating another gym, but if we built another gym out there and we decided that that we were going to make that a safe room, it would be considerably cheaper to do it that way than it would be to go and reinforce that gym or reinforce one of those classrooms that are already there or reinforce other rooms that may be in a building. So obviously our best bet is to start to look at buildings that we're building right now. And of course, we have the multimodal center, and we talked a little bit about that multimodal center. And can we reinforce certain rooms in there? And is it feasible for us to do that? There's going to be a cost associated with that. What that cost is and how much of that building you want to reinforce is all decisions that I think need to be made as we move forward in this process. And I think that's really why we're here tonight, is to talk about, you know, we've done a lot of research, we've looked at the city facilities. We understand that if we're going to shelter it, that's one decision. Do you want us to start to shelter city employees? Because we saw this last hurricane, they shut down the shelters. A lot of city employees who are required to work worried about their families being at home. So can we provide a shelter for them? My answer right now is we really don't have the facilities at this particular point to do that. But we may have those facilities as we move forward in the next 3, 4, 5 years as we look at building different facilities. And policies and procedures are extremely important because, you know, we'll have to have training, we'll have to staff it, we'll have to have supplies 24 hours. You know, typically we plan for 72 hours, and I'll tell you, at this last hurricane, I started to get a little bit worried that we had enough food to feed all the city employees, because we planned for 72 hours, and we were 30-some hours in the hurricane, and you know, we weren't getting supplies, and we were, you know, you can only eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches so many times.
Yeah, but you can eat hot dogs every day.
You can boil them, you can grill them.
83 different ways.
Fry them.
And understand the difference between a safe room concept and a recovery shelter are two different things. So this would just be a safe place during the storm. After the storm, obviously, then you talk about recovery, and you talk about, you know, how the county handles their shelters, and somebody may stay there for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, depending on the damage to their homes. But this is just really for the storm.
Let me ask a question about shelters and building you mentioned public safety building built to Category 5 standards. How about our newest fire station? What was that built to?
Actually, that was built to that kind of standard, but the capacity of it is...
No, not I'm just talking about construction standard. Do we have a policy what we build our new infrastructure construction to?
Well, actually, when we talked about that, one of the things that we looked at is the state building code, and the state building code is divided into 4 sections. The fire station was built to 4, which is the same as the public safety, and it could be used as shelter. The real challenge is for that facility is it doesn't have the capacity for that.
I thought you said it was built to Category 5 standards.
Well, there's 4 different levels, and that level is for the Center for Public Safety was built for the Category 5 standard. And actually, Station 4 I mean, y'all have toured that. That was built to Category 5 standards back then. The infrastructure, which is the superstructure, and how it's put into the ground to keep the wind from ripping it up. I'm not sure the garage doors would withstand those kinds of winds, but the structure itself was built to withstand that kind of wind.
Are you also talking about the new fire station too?
That's what I was talking about.
Fire station two, I wonder what that was built to.
Well, the infrastructure was built to that level 4, which would allow us to use it as a shelter. It would require us to look at the garage doors to make sure that the garage doors were functional, but the windows and everything else are impact resistant, so they should be good to a Category 4. The living quarters, I'm not talking about the garage, because those are built to a kind of a different type of standard. And then we also talked about the pets. I mean, are we, because that is an issue, you know, if people have pets, they have to work during a hurricane, where are they going to keep those pets? And then what information do you think would be valuable? How do you want us to proceed? Do you think we need to start to look at some of those city facilities and bring back to you, maybe, you know, we could retrofit this particular building, this is the cost? Do you want to proceed forward and look at new buildings and then plan for that? I mean, one of the things, just like the question you asked, is if we decide with Station 3, where we have that plan, that we're going to move Station 3 and build a new station, then maybe that's an opportunity to have some type of multi-use facility there, where we have a classroom facility that's used for classes during most of the time, but is built to a standard that it is a safe room, and we could house some additional people there. Now, there's some other infrastructure things that we have to look at. The refrigeration system. We learned that during the last hurricane, that we had all of our refrigerators full of food in the Center for Public Safety, and we probably needed more capacity, especially if we would have went for another 2 or 3 days without food.
And I guess the next question, are you wanting to house everybody in one place, or do we disperse them? You know, rather than try to build, you know, one big building with that big room, but can we house some of the Center for Public Safety, some of this fire station, some of that fire station? We're talking about a Jack Amyette. That's an opportunity for us to incorporate Jack Amyette, perhaps upgrade the design on it. So
I think just recognizing that as we look at future buildings, that we incorporate this thought process in making those decisions for that plan.
I guess I'm concerned about a 25% response rate. About what do we?
yeah,
75% of the employees either don't care to answer, or they have plans of their own.
And that may be true, that they do have plans of their own. They've made plans.
could you determine from the last hurricane how many actual employees worked during the hurricane, rather than, you know, that might be a more accurate sample than doing a survey.
Well, and we know that that we fed about 250 people. So we had about 250 of our employees working all the time.
You know, from a policy standpoint, I think there are some things that this is really an update. We're not going to have any answers relative to this hurricane season. When you begin to house the employee, that's one thing. You begin to house the employee's immediate family. Where do you begin to draw the line? Does that include the grandparents? Does it include, doesn't include? And because of state law, the city is not responsible for shelters. You know, we're looking at shelters from the standpoint of the employer-employee relationship. There are several things I think that the committee has identified. Number one is, if it's going to truly be a Category 4 or Category 5, we really don't want to be responsible for anybody except the absolute minimum number of city employees who have to be at work. You know, I think the second thing we've identified is retrofitting any of our existing buildings is just not a good thing to do. I think the third thing we've identified is work on this in what I'm gonna call increments as opportunities come up. Now, what does that mean? We're getting ready to finalize and get out to bid the multimodal building. One of the things that we know is that it is designed to the building code for a good Cat 2. It's not currently designed for a Cat 3 or higher. One of the questions that we would have, because we've asked the architect this, is to go back and redesign it so that we could bid it both ways as currently designed, or for a Cat 3, 4, or 5, how much would it cost to arm certain portions of it? And he's told us an extra $25,000, which, to be quite frank with you, I was thrilled with, because I would have thought that those extra armaments would have been, now that's just his design.
Design, right.
And he's also said that he could be looking at anywhere from $300,000 to $400,000 of additional money for that. So, you know, what we also know is the Jack Amyette building. In the next year, we're going to be doing something with that. We also know that you've put in money in the budget for us to study possibly what are we going to do with Fire Station 3. I think the committee did an outstanding job of really looking at issues. The bottom line comes down, though, to those points. And what my recommendation would be, and I think it's the committee, as Mike and I have talked about this, we should take this one step at a time. The first question we would ask you tonight is, do you, we cannot afford to hold up the multimodal building because we have all the money and we're ready to go. However, we do have enough time if you want to authorize roughly $25,000. It would be our money, city money, not FTA or state money, to at least put that in as an alternate bid. You'd also have to recognize that that alternate bid, whatever it is, 300,000, pick any number you want, it's going to have to come from the city. It's not going to come from FTA. So,
How big is the building and by?
7,500.
I don't remember how.
7,500. Total building, as you recall, it's basically two buildings that are joined together.
I mean,
So
could it house?
in total, it's 15,000 and change.
The
So
way it's designed,
individually,
could it
it's
house enough people to justify.
you could, the answer there is yes, and let me explain that. The Center for Public Safety, we believe, is sufficient to house all of the public safety personnel that need to be housed, especially, you know, given the fact that Station 2 and Station 4 are pretty substantial, and the odds of us getting a Category 4 or 5 hurricane is whatever anybody wants to guess. Now, on the other hand, your public works people are the other group that's really required to be here. So if you're going to do anything at the multimodal center, it would really be for public works personnel and some of Anthony's people. And with that category, you know, you're talking about housing about 100 people.
And we kind of looked at it and looked at the space and looked at, kind of put some, that 20 square foot per person. So I think roughly 100 people could be there.
Richard, what you're saying is that at the public safety building in the future, you would house the public safety personnel and their families at the public safety building?
No, not families. We're talking about just the public safety employees.
They will be at the Center for Public Safety.
And then we would encourage the employee to encourage their family to evacuate.
Oh, to evacuate, I got you.
Yeah, because now while we did have some families who stayed there, the vast majority of the employees who were on duty, required to be on duty, their families were elsewhere. Now that did cause a concern. I think that the reality of housing families, because even on the limited numbers we got, as Mike said, we were talking about what was your family member?
About 500.
Yeah.
500.
Plus pets, that's
Plus pets.
that's where it really gets messy.
And then.
This is a family show, I was trying to explain.
But I think at this point, our recommendation is let's take this thing one building at a time. Let's not try to get into housing families. That is something that I think that the employee is going to be worried about what's happening to their families. But it just gets to the point where how do you feed them? How do you cover the pets? How do you? I guess the only question we have for you tonight, other than an excellent update that Mike has given you, is do you want us to spend any money at this point analyzing an alternative bid for the multimodal center?
Any additional cost involved in actually construction would still be covered under the FTA grants, right?
100% us.
If I could, I mean,
Please.
that, I think that it probably would, honestly. And I apologize if I offered some incorrect information before. If we were to move forward with the design, our contribution for the $20,000, which is additional, will be $5,000. That would get us to the point where we could potentially bid the base building as well as an add alternate for what we call the strengthened building. Now, once we go to construction, we know relatively certain that the design is going to be covered by FTA. Now, once we get to construction, I'm not certain of that either. I think, and this is greater than, I would say, 80% certainty, that FTA would probably cover that as well. We would still be obligated for the local match, which is the value of the land. But because they have such an emphasis on safety, security, emergency preparedness, they really encourage things like this to happen.
I apologize for that misunderstanding. Let us document that and ask the
If
question
it's $5
again.
grand, I'd say go ahead.
Yeah, let us document that and we'll get back to you on June the 18th.
John,
I have one question in regards to that before you close it while we're talking about it. At some time ago, we had discussions about having emergency storage of MREs and cots and that sort of thing. Are we still thinking about that and moving forward with some of that?
And we've actually, what we've done is we've gotten several generators from the military, and we got one portable refrigerator unit. I'm not sure it's going to be feasible for us to fix. So we've been looking at the military. They have those refrigerator units that they drop in for somebody that. So we've been looking to get those, and they'll run on generators. And then we've been buying cots and sleeping bags so that we have plenty of cots and sleeping bags.
that's something you get through that DRMO.
Mm-hmm. So the three generators, they're actually all operational. They're 60 kW generators. So we'll be able to use those and deploy those and if we ever have the need for them again, whether it's for water or whether it's for whatever it might be. And those are large generators. We got some trailers from DRMO as well to make sure. And we're still looking at that to see what else we could get that could be beneficial for us.
Thank you, Mr. Carter.
But many of the items that we identified in the way of rain gear and those type things that are simply built into your budget have already been approved.
Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to make a point about federal transit and the communities that participate in those programs. As you recall, a few months ago, I did some research along with Anthony and Richard and others in reference to the MV contract, moving it over to First Transit. We talked about, or we investigated labor issues and things of that nature. Also learned some things at that time. I was waiting for the opportune moment to just make sure and make it a point and make sure that my clerk gets it in the minutes that I've given to this, and maybe something that you've already said, oh, I expected that all along. But a community that participates in the federal transit programs like a marriage is wonderful. marriages are, as long as they're good. But when they don't go so good, they become divorces, which sometimes can get ugly. In this particular case, what I'm pointing to is that when we moved from MV over to First Transit, there were some folks, or at least council, that said, wait, oh, do we need to keep moving in this direction or whatever? But once you leave the transit program, you will then owe back you will owe back to the federal government, if you were to ever leave it, the money that they have invested. Now, there's an amortization period, I think it's 40 years.
For a building.
For a building. And it hadn't been such a problem so far as the buses, because their life cycles have life cycled out and so forth. It's not been an issue there. In fact, we've utilized those buses elsewhere. But as you begin to move to this type of a structure where, of course, the match the city's putting forward is the land, no money other than what y'all are talking about this evening. But if any point in the future in that 40-year period you were to decide to get out of the program, there is a payback to the federal government again, using a 40-year amortization on the building. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that, because I don't know that we've ever discussed that before. It certainly became very clear to me when we were doing the research on the labor issues with the First Transit. And I just wanted to make sure that got in the record. Not to change anything, but then I think it's always good to know everything up front.
It's good to be aware of it.
To be aware of it. Thank you.
So how rapidly, over 40 years, what would
It clicks off on over that period.
It's 80%, so the federal share of any capital investment that we make is 80%. So over the lifespan of 40 years, the value of that building would be depreciated. Okay?
But basically, we would buy it out.
We would buy out the depreciated 80% value of that building at the time that we would buy it out.
The chief, I was mentioning this to him before. He says he's lived this. Bristol actually decided we don't want. You tell the story better than I can too.
They decided they weren't going to do busing anymore. They had to pay some money back. They had a city bus system in Bristol, Virginia, and Tennessee, and it was actually Bristol, Virginia, that made that decision.
Was it a building involved in that too?
There wasn't a building, but there was capital, like buses and stuff, and so there was some payback that the city of Bristol, Virginia, made back to.
But then they got back in the business after a couple of years.
Yeah, they did.
Back into the transit business. So, again, just information, which is all I'm here to share with you.
Okay.
At this point, could we take a break and then come into closed session?
We're going to take a break, but we're going to recess the council meeting, and we're going to go into closed session.
Get a motion to go into closed session.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
On the One City moment, we would like to take a moment to recognize the Jacksonville Fire and Emergency Services on their new ISO rating. You were
Great
notified
news.
this past week
Yep,
that
great
they
news.
were upgraded
That's
from a
fantastic.
3 down to a 2. And there aren't that many in the state that
I was
are
gonna ask
2s.
you that.
And that- I believe at the last count, there were only 11 in the entire state that were 2s, and for us to have accomplished
There's only
that.
one in Greenville, I think. Not Greenville, Greensboro,
Greensboro.
You got a 1?
I think.
Refresh me again on what kind of impact that'll have on the average citizen.
Well, on the, if I understand correctly, the primary benefit is to the commercial.
Commercial property.
The lower, from a residential standpoint, it really doesn't impact, but the lower you go for commercial, it really results in substantial savings.
Insurance
So,
costs.
insurance costs. Memorial Day, we had a great Memorial Day this past week. The community takes Memorial Day seriously. As a home of the Marines and sailors, we understand what sacrifice means, and Memorial Day means a lot to us. WRIL out of Raleigh came to town with the Tar Heel Traveler, a gentleman named Scott Mason, and he visited the memorial, and he learned a lot. And I think most of you know John Legato. John walked the Vietnam Memorial with him and talked to him about things. And he learned, I think both John and Mr. Mason learned a lot about our memorials and how much we do here to remember. The D-Day tribute. It's hard to believe 75 years ago this week was the invasion, D-Day. What most people may not realize is that a lot of the training that occurred for the Army units that were going to be involved in the invasion actually occurred out here in Onslow County as part of what had been purchased for Camp Lejeune. In the notes that Glenn has given me, he mentions the fact that you had the, the Army's 1st and 9th Divisions that were principally made up for the invasion. Many do not know that those Army units got their training right here at Onslow Beach. There were 365 Marines who also participated in the invasion. As we hear the news and tributes to D-Day this week, let us all remember those who helped to train the Army and Coast Guard for this historic event. And let us also remember those who gave the ultimate sacrifice. Now, this past week, as you know, Gwen and I had the opportunity to be in Europe and to actually see the way that the French and others, Italians and others, are thanking the American soldiers for the freedom that they now enjoy. So, thank you again for your leadership. It's always an honor to work with you.
Richard, I just, real quick, the John Legato, the WRAL clip, and it's an actual video, and I encourage y'all to, I think Glenn may have sent you the link. I really encourage you all to watch it. It is an excellent, excellent clip, and it's getting a lot of recognition all over, because this guy is very known in his travels, and he did such a great job for us. And so if you get a chance, click on it and watch that video.
You go to Handy?
It was at the end of the TDA meeting.
It's at the end of the TDA meeting, but I want to say that Glenn sent out the clip, but I encourage you all to look, you need to watch it. It's very, very good.
I'd like to get it.
We'll get that to you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn? We have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
There was a second.
By the way, we had a.
I'm just picking people.